Best thing about Stoke-on-Trent is
The people. So friendly.
When I first came, I thought, what the hell is this?
Used to live on the same street that Stanley Matthews was.
Well, I've met Eric Bristow.
Josiah Wedgwood, Robbie Williams.
The worst things.
Potholes.
Potholes.
Shocking in the village.
Best oat cake fillings, sausage and cheese.
Bacon and cheese.
Cheese and bacon.
It's bacon and cheese.
I used to have jam in it.
No.
I don't like oatcakes.
Robbie.
Stoke has its own identity. Everybody thinks it's just about pots.
Stoke.
Mark Steele's in town.
Thank you so much, and welcome to Mark Steele's in Town, which comes this week from the glamorous, fashionable billionaires' playground of Stoke-on-Trent, the Potteries. Obviously, it was a huge blow to Stoke when the Russian oligarchs had their yachts seized and they all had to be towed out of the Trent and Mersey Canal. But it's still as classy here as it always was, because Stoke is a city of the most amazing contrasts. On the one hand, your pots have always been renowned across the world, so Stoke is associated with the finest beauty. And on the other hand, as you look around the town... Jesus wept. All around the world there are people with teapots and cups and saucers from here, and they'll be in Melbourne or something saying it's a genuine Wedgwood from Stoke, and they must imagine one day drifting down Hanley High Street gasping, Parliament Row, it sounds so grand. But in fact, it must be the only town in Britain where a vase costs more than a house. There's a unique layout to all the streets here. In other towns with rows of brick houses from Victorian times, there'll be a terrace, then a shop, then more houses and maybe a pub. But here it goes house, derelict house, heap of rubble, pottery museum, nail bar, derelict pottery museum, beautiful 50-foot high Victorian bottle kiln, demolished street that was going to be levelled up, but the government got as far as knocking everything down and then changed its mind. Astonishingly out-of-place Mercedes-Benz showroom. Derelict house. You were supposed to be one of the biggest winners from Levelling Up. Are you all fans of Levelling Up? No, of course not. I mean, if it was real Levelling Up, I think it would be much easier and more successful if they'd had a Levelling Down project. So you pop up to Stafford and demolish 2/3 of their buildings. So many... Posh Stafford, with its flowers. Still have to come here for their pots, don't they? So many of the shops are shut down here. Hanley is the centre of Stoke, and you can tell it's the financial heart of the city, because all the other areas have boarded up shops, but Hanley has boarded up supermarkets. People are so friendly here. I'm not to say they're genuinely friendly. I was walking by that corner of Hanley, not far from here, opposite the bus station, and a bloke of about 30 suddenly come up to me and said, "Are you looking for something to do?" Out of nowhere, I said, "Not really, I'm open to offers." I said, "Does anything happen here?" He went, "Oh yeah, loads goes on in Stoke. I just saw a robbery from B&M. There's loads of robberies here. It's worse in Longton because druggies break into Iceland." I love the idea of thieves going into pubs, going, "I've got some frozen apple strudel, marmite." I look for clips of Stoke on YouTube. I swear, honestly, these were the names of the first clips that come up. Stoke, the city with no hope. Hanley, why is it empty? Hanley, don't come here. Longton, how bad is it? Stoke, drug capital of the UK, and the monkey dust epidemic that has Stoke in its grip. I think you need to market yourself better on the internet. Monkey dust does sound terrible. I suppose if I'd done my research properly, I'd have gone and had some, but... It's £2 for a shot. Does it come in shots? I don't know. Loads of people have got addicted. No one outside Stoke seems to have heard of it. So there are millions of drugs around the world, and Stoke, you've managed to discover a new one. And the wonderful thing about drugs in Stoke is I bet you've all got lovely little pots with palm trees on to keep them in. But there are lots and lots of books to give a more positive view. So one that I've got here in this little array of books here was called Secret Stoke-on-Trent. And this is part of a series. Lots and lots of towns have these books. They usually tell quirky stories about how Marlon Brando once got stranded there or something. And in the one about Stoke, the first 3 pages of the Stoke-on-Trent book are accounts of people who committed suicide in Victorian time in the canal at Bootham. And that bit ended, which I'll be honest was a relief. And the next part started, I'll read the exact words. In an incident in 1893, commuters waiting on the platform at Longton Railway Station had a shock when the Derby train arrived on time, with a severed head on the front of the end. The incident was, of course, portrayed in a set of ceramic plates in 1894. That was strangely one of the less popular Wedgwood designs. There are, of course, people who come to Stoke for reasons that aren't to do with pottery. I read this on the Mumsnet website. I'm off to Stoke on Sunday to meet my long-distance partner. We can only manage an afternoon. Can anyone recommend anything to do in Stoke Centre, please? And the reply was, I actually think Stoke Station is really nice, so your best bet is to stay there. We had a lovely time. We spent the morning by the ticket machine and then the afternoon on platform 3. We thought about going outside to see the Wedgwood statue, but we stayed indoors to see if a severed head came past. Now, you will know, of course, that this show is with the wrong title this week. It should be Mark Steele's In Towns, because Stoke is 6 different towns that came together to form Stoke-on-Trent city in 1910. There's Burslem, Hanley, Tunstall, Fenton, Longton, and the town of Stoke. And something that's very important to understand here is the centre of Stoke, the city, isn't Stoke, the town, it's in Hanley. So to get from the centre of Stoke to Stoke, you have to leave Stoke centre and head to Stoke. And the town of Stoke is called Stoke-upon-Trent, whereas the city of Stoke, of which Stoke is only one part and not the centre, is Stoke-on-Trent. And some people from outside Stoke can't seem to understand this, the idiots. It's no wonder some of you need monkey dust to get through the day. According to a brief history of Stoke I have here, there had been attempts to unify the 6 towns in the 19th century, but all of them failed. Now, to get this in perspective, Stoke, in the 19th century, it was possible to unify Germany and Italy and the United States of America, but not Stoke, because Prussian barons and Confederate rebels were a bit of a nuisance, but nothing compared to the angry independent people of Fenton and Tunstall. And to make it even more complicated, there's another town, Newcastle-under-Lyme, that isn't part of Stoke. Should it be part of Stoke? Because they're all stuck up there. You should see the price of their monkey dust. Here's something else you don't get in Cheshire. There was a scheme in the Portland Street area where you could buy a house for £1. That is amazing. You had to have family in Stoke to qualify, because otherwise you'd have had people coming up from London going, there's not as much cupboard space as I'd hoped, and putting in an offer for 65 pence. And you'd probably have people in Stoke now going, well, we got on the property ladder in 2018 and we bought our place for £1 and already it's been valued at £3.50, so it's been such an investment. Some parts of the city of Stoke obviously have dodgy reputation, but it isn't fair, Stoke. It isn't. I was in Fenton and I looked up things to do in Fenton. There's a website, things to do in Fenton, and there was one thing which was to go to the Six Towns viewing point, which was lovely, up on a hill by the farm, but slightly sad that the only thing to do in Fenton is go somewhere where you can see everywhere that isn't Fenton. Some people say that the system of six towns isn't efficient because you have 6 town halls and 6 of everything. Hanley, for example, has a derelict industrial estate with all the windows smashed, so Burslem has to have one as well. And in the end, you're a federation of the 6 towns, so you are a bit like America, and they've got the presidents carved into Mount Rushmore, and you're campaigning for a statue of Lemmy from Motorhead in Burslem. So it's very much the same. You do seem to have an issue sometimes with statues. For example, one famous figure from history who comes from Hanley is the captain of the Titanic, Captain Smith. And you must be very proud. Of all the people in the world who deserve a statue being made of them, Captain Smith of the Titanic, as it was colliding into the iceberg, did he think they'll build a statue of me for this? Gave Captain Smith of Hanley the job of being a captain of a ship in the first place? Stoke is as far from the sea as it's possible to be in Britain. They must have gone, well, he hired a canoe in Trent Park for an hour and didn't hit any icebergs at all. It'll be ideal. He did have an exemplary career up until that point. I found this article about him in a history magazine. In 1911, he was captain of the Olympic, which was extensively damaged in a collision with a British cruiser. To really commemorate him, you'd need to build the statue, but not fix it properly, so it accidentally toppled over and crashed through the window of Primark. There's a beer called Titanic here. Do you all go, I'll sink a couple of these? You must do. Maybe the statue campaign is part of the effort to level up. There was this report on ITV News. The government's Levelling Up department has apologised after an advert promoting local funding was released in the wrong Newcastle. The electronic poster, which appeared next to the Guildhall in Newcastle-under-Lyme, Staffordshire, flagged up £7 million worth of investment destined for Granger Market in Newcastle-upon-Tyne, 200 miles away. Fancy thinking Newcastle city centre isn't in the centre of Newcastle. And they always seem to be promising to level up here. The Stoke-on-Trent live website says it was back in 1999 when plans first emerged for a multi-million-pound development of Hanley's crumbling east-west precinct. Initial artist impressions show shoppers strolling through a glass-roofed shopping plaza. Oh, they're just taking the piss with that. Nearly a quarter of a century later, the plans are again in tatters. There have been many false dawns to develop this blot on Hanley's landscape. But shouldn't the architects be commended for designing something that is a blot on Hanley? That's brilliant architecture, isn't it? To make people go, oh, you've spoilt the look of Hanley. Another talking point here is the A500, which you all call? D Road. The D Road, a road that's in a sort of D shape, but not really, that links you to the M6 and, according to Stoke-on-Trent Live, involved the destruction of streets and businesses within Stoke's town centre, as well as the excavation of a mass grave of the victims of a 17th century cholera epidemic. Oh, for God's sake, do you need to get to the M6 that badly? Who knows what diseases and evil spirits have been unleashed so you can get to Nantwich 1 minute quicker? And there are all these wonderful bottle kilns here, huge brick storage buildings that look like giant bottles, and they're all over the city, and they're Stoke and nobody else has got them. Apparently the shape meant that 70% of the energy was wasted, and eventually they were banned under the Clean Air Act. But you're happy to dig up a burial site to get to Aldi quicker, so you're not going to give a toss about that, are you? And in your defence, These stone things are beautiful. Do you all think they're beautiful, or do you just get used to them? They're marvellous. And the fact that they were hopelessly inefficient makes them all the more beautiful. They've contributed to global warming, but look at them. They're delightful. In fact, if you'd built a few more of them, you might have melted a few more icebergs and saved a lot of trouble for your hero, Captain Smith. Anything still here from the world of pottery is amazing. Even the names of areas in Stoke are exotic because they're from other parts of the world that are famous for making pots that were named by Wedgwood. So there's Etruria and Florence and Dresden. And I expect once a week a lorry driver arrives in Florence, Stoke, thinking, don't look like it does in the paintings. The trouble is, the government's going to level up the wrong places, aren't they? It'll be Newcastle all over again. Florence in Italy, you'll get a new branch of Morrison's. Dresden will get a Primark, and Ben Stokes, the England cricket captain, will get a covered market selling cheese and olives. This whole city was built like that. An article about the opening of Longton Park in 1888 says, the people of Longton knew it was smoky, but the way they saw it was where there was smoke, there was cash. And in 1914, the Nuisance Abatement Committee complained to Stoke Council about the alarming levels of smoke. And the council's official response was, we want more smoke. And that should have been your slogan. Smoke, smoke, smoke. There's nothing woke about Stoke. Going back even before that, of course, are the events way back in time that made the city. Because 310 million years ago, this area was covered with vegetation that rotted and became coal or clay. And the coal was the type that was perfect for firing ovens, and the clay was perfect for making bricks and drain pipes and building. And what's useful, I think, about seeing the area in this long-term geological way is it puts into perspective the mere 25 years it's taken to start work on the Hanley East-West precinct. By the 14th century, licences were already being granted to dig for clay to make pots, and then the first coal was mined, and now you were on your way, Stoke, all set to become an ex-pottery town that no one quite knows what to do with. The next big turning point was in the 1700s. The East India Company started bringing back tea from China, and then it became cheap. And in the 1750s, a journalist wrote, the use of tea has descended to the plebeian order amongst us. He said, men have lost their stature and women their beauty by sipping tea. It is the curse of the nation that the labourer and the mechanic will ape the lord in drinking tea. Oh, you could see how the aristocracy must be upset. Imagine thinking tea is the preserve of the upper class, and then in Hangley and Longton they're going, all right, Duck, do you want sugar with that? Are you sweet enough, darling? But then as tea became popular, so did teacups and teapots and jugs, so the demand for ceramics took off, and this was your chance. Stoke was in demand. Everybody wanted your ceramics. A new factory was set up to make more ornamental objects, and the leading figure in all of this was Josiah Wedgwood, who got factories built across the city and turned Stoke into the centre of world pottery. And of course, if he'd done things properly, instead of building the factories, he'd have published an artist's impression of what they would look like. And then scrap it 20 years later. And the Wedgwood family had made pots for over 100 years, but now Josiah Wedgwood made it into this massive industry. And he was making designs that the royal families of Europe wanted, but also cheaper pots that most other people could afford. And he saw it as a part of the triumph of science over religion and of improving the lives of common people. Wedgwood campaigned for the abolition of slavery, and he made thousands of clay medallions for free with a picture of a slave saying, am I not a man and a brother? And these were worn all round the world. And he did all of this with only 1.5 legs because of a combination of smallpox and an accident when his horse fell down a pothole, meaning that he had to have his right leg amputated below the knee without an anaesthetic. Jesus, your history is so grim. You'd think when it came to the founder of the modern potteries, a man of international wealth and prestige, there'd be a moment of joy, but no. In one of these books here, When I Was a Child, about a woman brought up here in the 1840s, she says, drinking on the works was horrible, followed by jollification and devilry. The night was a revel of drink, lust and beastliness. This is your charm. For example, the Secret History book tells us, in 1870, Police Sergeant Onions witnessed the drunken Samuel Cronlon climbing to the top of a street lamp in St John's Square, Burslem, at 2 a.m. 15 feet above the ground, he opened the door of the lamp so he could light his pipe. How Stoke was he? And the local paper reported that at Longton Church on Sunday last, the vicar, who was to preach a funeral sermon, was suddenly taken sick due to the previous night's debauchery. He vomited a quantity of filth, had to be taken from the church and led home. The vicar. Now, normally with this show, I get to a town and I find that the reality is very different from the stereotype. It doesn't seem to work here. There was a proper riot here in 1842. The miners were on strike. They threw a policeman in the pond, and there was a full-on battle in the middle of Burslem between the people of the town and the soldiers. And the soldiers, according to one account, were getting on top until there was a cry in the crowd as supporters of the riot from other towns arrived, and the crowd shouted, "They're coming from Leek." What? Of all the revolutionary slogans in history, never mind liberté, égalité, fraternity, they're coming from Leek is better than all of them. And these were the times that shaped Stoke-on-Trent. The 6 towns were a massive pot factory. When J.B. Priestley came here in the 30s, he said, "I have seen few regions from which nature has been banished more ruthlessly." But what's amazing about industrial Stoke is all this smoke and grime was used to create the most beautiful, delicate designs, like a bunch of grapes on a saucer. And the craftsmen in Stoke must have been glazing designs going, "What is this?" Someone would go, "It's a flower. I've never heard of them. They must have them down London." You could go on tours at the museums now, except they're not just museums, because they still make thousands of pots in these things. Like if you went on a tour of the site of the Battle of Naseby and they were still spearing each other. So that's why I'd like to introduce Liam. Is Liam here?
Hey up.
Hey up, Liam. So, Liam, where do you do the tours that we went round yesterday?
Emma Bridgewater's factory in Lichfield Street.
Emma Bridgewater factory. But there's just how many things are made there? I got lost in the sea of numbers. Thousands, isn't there?
We make 33,000 pieces of pottery a week.
33,000 a week?
33,000, yeah.
I love some of the terms. What is it like you know when you put the thing in the middle of the thing upside down and then the right way round?
Yeah, so we still have jiggers and jolliers on the site, which are quite rare job titles now as well.
I can't. I wonder how many people go to a careers advice person at school and they go, "I think you'd be rather good as a jigger, but not a jollier." And what are the different names for the sponges as well?
So we have teardrops, zoomers, and my favourite is the diddler.
And what happens if you use the wrong one? If you use
the sack. No, I'm joking. Diddlers are for your spouts.
Okay, for the spouts. So have you all been to these? Yeah. What I found strange, did you go round? So these people are doing these incredibly intricate little bits of work and that, with the sponges and the diddlers and the jollying and the jiggling. And as you go round, do they not mind people sort of peering at them and taking pictures of them?
No, they love it, honestly, because I feel like with Stoke, it's so nice for people to see, like, people appreciate their craft.
OK, well, I've got 2 questions. This is from someone who, I don't understand it. Tell me if this is... But I think I can make it more efficient. These all of these items are baked in the ovens for 9 hours.
Yeah.
Nowadays, couldn't you use an air fryer?
I wish.
Also, What I love is that on the tour, you go around, there's all these incredibly skilled people, and you describe brilliantly, just how skilled they are. Like, to get the job, everyone has to do a thing with the dots, don't they?
Yeah, so it's called a trade test. So you're invited in to actually try and do the job before you actually get the interview.
And only one person gets the job, is
Yeah, the best one that comes back from the kiln is the person that gets the job.
So this is really high-pressure eye skills. And then, at the end of the tour, you say, now, anyone who wants to can sit and do their own one.
Yeah, yeah.
And everyone, and I've sought, now I am so useless at anything artistic, but at least I know I am. Do you really get people going round on a tour and go, I can do that?
Yeah, it's really embarrassing, to be fair, because once I was on a tour and I showed them a mug and I was like, this one says 2.5 years old, and it was someone that was 25. And it was like just coloured in paint, it was like a lovely shade of brown.
Thank you. The pot shaped everything about Stoke. Phil Taylor, the greatest darts player of all time, who's from Burslem, used to make ceramic toilet roll holders. And I wonder where he learnt the discipline of doing the same apparently pointless thing over and over again. Until he was perfect at it. Eric Bristow ran a pub here where Phil Taylor learnt to play darts, and Eric lent him £10,000 to get started as a player. This is all perfect as Stoke celebrity stories, isn't it? These are the celebrities you're going to have in Stoke. Stephen Fry was never going to be from here. Robbie Williams is from Stoke. There's a Robbie Williams heritage trail that boasts you can see Victoria Park where Robbie would have played football. I think that being able to say you've seen the park where Robbie Williams once probably played football is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that no one should miss. Have you all been on it? No, of course you haven't. Phil Taylor and Robbie Williams are both Port Vale fans, and I love that you've got room for 2 Football League teams here, and one of them has Port in the title when there's no sea for hundreds of miles, which is probably what confused Captain Smith. Stanley Matthews, one of England's greatest ever players, was born in Hanley. In 1930, he signed a contract with Stoke to play for £1 a week. And you've got to remember, prices weren't the same as now. Back then, a house in Stoke was 1 and 9. Since those days, following Stoke City hasn't always been glorious, I think it's fair to say, but you've never sought glamour. There was one player from the 1990s, Nigel Gleghorn, who said about the training regime, the manager Lou Macari would send us on a training run every Monday morning around the incinerator 30 times. Which is so Stoke. Other teams have kinetic gym machines and ergonomic muscle development coaches, and you run 30 times round the incinerator. And then when Lou Macari came in as the new manager, the book says one of his first measures was to ban drinking on the team bus. That's to the matches, not after. He was out of order there. It's a Stoke tradition to drink at work, even if your work is to play Ipswich in an hour's time. The greatest figure, of course, in Stoke football history was not even a player, but the kit man. Because Neil Baldwin, who'd been sacked from the circus as a clown, lived with his mum and was looking for a job. And apparently, when the job centre asked what sort of job he was looking for, he said, manager of Stoke. And when they questioned this, he said, all right then, manager of anyone, but I'll draw the line at Port Vale. When Lou Macari was appointed manager, Neil went to the ground and Macari spoke to him. He was impressed because he didn't think it was possible to get sacked as a clown, and so they had a conversation about it, and he gave Neil a job as the kit man. He'd sit in on the team talks. Once he stood behind Lou Macari in a kilt and lifted it up during a TV interview, and he became more famous than the players, and there was this wonderful film made about him called Marvellous, with Neil played by Toby Jones, and meanwhile the team got relegated and lost every week, but you can't have everything. But you did get a beautiful new ground by the D Road, which you celebrated during the first season like this, according to Stoke and I. After losing 7-0 at home to Birmingham, 1,000 fans invaded the pitch. They broke into the Waddington suite looking for the board, tipping over tables until the police restored order. See, one of the complaints about modern football is the clubs have lost touch with the town's identity. But you've kept yours. I would love to speak to my dear friend Nick Hancock. Nick, we went in a lovely pub called the Beehive. And you were telling us about a woman that was always there.
Well, there used to be a little plaque on the wall that said, "This is Bet's Corner," and she would always sit there, and she'd be there all the time. I mean, you went in any time of the day, most nights she was there. Anyway, we went in one Friday night, the night before the game, and she said, "Stoke at home tomorrow?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, you won't see me. You won't see me. No. I'm going to Calais, because the pub's organised a buzz and we're all going to go to Calais. We're going to get cheap fags, we're going to get cheap drinks, so you won't see me tomorrow. I promise you that." So, of course, we go to the game next day, come back up, Bet sat in a corner. I said, "What's happened, Bet? What's happened with the bus?" She goes, "Oh, you won't believe it. Oh, you've got to have a bloody passport, go France."
The most extraordinary Stoke story is how important you are to the Czech Republic and how much you angered Hitler. In 1942, Czechoslovakia had been occupied by the Nazis, and Hitler had placed his loyal Nazi mate Reinhard Heydrich in charge of the place. And Heydrich was brutal, even by Nazi standards. And the Czech resistance, in alliance with the British government, assassinated him. And Hitler was furious, and it took a lot to make him like that because he had a long fuse. And Hitler ordered the most massive vengeance, and hundreds of people were shot in revenge, but no one knew. The Nazis couldn't find out who had done the assassination. And the Nazis then learnt that 2 British paratroopers had been in a mining village called Lidice, and they decided it must have been people from that village who had carried out the murder. And so they killed almost every adult in the village, and they had the children adopted by German families. Hitler had the whole village totally destroyed, so there was only a field left. And they'd also filmed themselves, the Nazis, blowing the village up to show the world what they'd done. So an international campaign was launched called Lidice Shall Live, which started in Stoke. And Stoke was the centre of the campaign because a man called Dr. Barnett Stross was a doctor here who had worked with Stoke's miners, and he organised a meeting of miners at Victoria Hall in Hanley, at which every miner pledged to pay 1 day a week's wages until the end of the war towards rebuilding the village. The exiled Czech president spoke, saying, "Lidice lives on in the heart of the people of Stoke-on-Trent." And this sparked an international campaign to raise money. So after the war, the village could be rebuilt, and a road in it was named after Barnett Stross. The miners from Stoke went to Czechoslovakia to help with the rebuilding. Stoke and Lidice are now officially twinned, and a sculpture in Lidice is dedicated to the miners of Stoke. Though, if the miners at Stoke had thought about it, they'd have rebuilt Lidice as 6 villages. One of which was called Lidice, but that wasn't in the middle of Lidice, so to get from the centre of Lidice to Lidice, you had to leave Lidice centre and head up to Lidice. And hopefully in the centre of the village square of Lidice, there's an oatcake shop. Because another achievement of this city is how Stoke has preserved the oatcake. You all fans of oatcakes? Now, I should must say this for anybody who doesn't know. Oatcakes are not like the arty biscuits you get in Scotland that the Scottish have the audacity to call oatcakes. This point I'd like to introduce Mark Adams. Mark, what is your relationship to the oatcake?
Well, they've just always been there, you know, oatcakes. It's like asking people like yourself, what is it that you like about bread?
So you send the oatcake mix round the world?
That's correct, yeah. People from this area, when they move away, we send them out to them via post, and we've sold thousands all over the world. And people get quite emotional. Yeah, absolutely. We get emails from people in Australia, for example, who've not eaten an oatcake for 20 years. And they'll be absolutely weeping.
Weeping?
Yes.
So, yeah. Are there different recipes in each of the 6 towns?
There's oatcake shops all over the city. They all vary. They're basically the same ingredients, but it's just the blends that they use and that kind of thing. They've all got a distinctive taste from shop to shop, really.
So as an oatcake connoisseur, could you go... Fenton?
Yeah.
Someone told me as well, it's very, very similar with monkey dust. The flavour is slightly different in each of the towns. I'll just say as well, the shops where you buy them, traditionally you buy them out of a window, don't you? So it's not like a restaurant, they're just sold out of someone's window.
Yeah, it's like a street food kind of thing, really, if you will.
Yeah. I read one article that said, I don't know what you think of this, oatcakes can be eaten with sweet fillings such as golden syrup, jam or banana. But this is less common and frowned upon by traditionalists. I should think it is. What are they supposed to have in them? Bacon and cheese and sausage. Yeah. You might as well say Stilton cheese can be eaten in a bowl of sugar puffs. But this is frowned upon by traditionalists.
Yeah, it's breakfast items, really. So, yeah, mushrooms maybe, egg.
We had a funny conversation yesterday when you said that some people put honey on it, and you said that's...
Posh.
Yeah. And I said, oh, what, like Manuka honey? And you went, no, just like honey from Lidl.
Yeah.
Oh, bless you, Stoke, that honey from Lidl is posh. But I'll just go back to Liam. Like, you knew someone who put jam on it.
Jam, guys. Jam on an oatcake. I was fuming.
Were they just sort of...
Well, I think they were on monkey dust, to be fair.
They live in Telford now. Also, I've had people say to me, oh, Nick, you would say to about your son who's a vegetarian.
Yeah, he's a vegetarian, except for oatcakes. So it's like a double principle thing. It's a principle that he's a vegetarian, but it's a principle that he should have bacon on his oatcakes. So, you know, it's...
So does it just bacon doesn't count? Like, can Jews and Muslims have, like... Mark, maybe that's the solution we've all been looking for. There are so many other reasons for Stoke to celebrate. H.G. Wells is said to have written his book, The Time Machine, here. And I wonder what would inspire someone in a town that in the 21st century sells houses for £1 to think it's possible to travel through time. It's also claimed that Shane McGowan wrote Fairy Tale of New York here. I wonder what would inspire someone as they watched people arguing outside the pubs of Hanley on Friday night at closing time to think of writing "You're a bum, you're a drunk, you scumbag, you maggot." Josiah Wedgwood is commemorated here with a beautiful statue outside the station, and also commemorated because the pothole where he fell down on his horse is still there today. But people are so proud of Stoke. You love the place. You love the Pots and one or other of the football clubs and the D Road and the fact that it's 6 places and that writer Arnold Bennett wrote about the 5 towns because he forgot Fenton, the idiot. And you love the connection to Ladycha and the millions of people who come here because you're Stoke, and loads of other people come here to get the bus to Alton Towers, but they'll have a better time at Trent and Monkey Forest and the queues won't be as long, and Cheshire may have pretty bits of twaddle, but the Romans built that and not people of Stoke. So I will leave you, Stoke, with the beautiful chapter in H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, written in Stoke in 1895, inspired by your city to see the future. I arrived in the year 802,701 AD to discover a strange world. I was in a city of people known as Morlocks. I asked a citizen where I could find the centre of their metropolis. This is the centre of Morlock Town, he said, but Morlock Town, the city, isn't Morlock Town, the town. So to get from the centre of Morlock Town to Morlock Town, you have to leave Morlock Town centre and head to Morlock Town. As I ventured to the centre of Morlock Town, there was a great commotion, a celebration for the opening of the East-West Hanley precinct. Suddenly I was chastened by a frightened soul. "Quick, they're coming from Leek," he cried. We scrambled into my machine that hurtled wildly through the centuries. Don't worry, I assured my companion. If we crash this time machine, causing a split in the space-time vortex and destroying a chunk of the universe, they'll build a statue of us in Stoke.
Mark Steele's in Town was written and performed by Mark Steele with additional material from Pete Sinclair.